Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving straight into the fascinating, honestly kind of mind-blowing world of brain research. We're going to uncover exactly how learning physically changes your mind, and more importantly, how you can actively shape your own brain. We'll be drawing on the groundbreaking insights of Dr. Laura Boyd, a brain researcher at the University of British Columbia, who is really at the forefront of understanding human physiology and what makes us who we are. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 1. Shattering old brain myths. 2. How neuroplasticity actually works. 3. The stroke recovery puzzle. 4. The personalization paradigm. And finally, 5. Build the brain you want. Let's get right into it.
All right, part 1. Shattering old brain myths. We are starting off broad here by addressing a massive shift in how science actually views the human brain.
For decades, we just operated under this incredibly rigid belief system that after puberty, your brain was static. Like, it was all downhill from there. And the only changes you could expect were negative, like losing brain cells as you age. But thanks to advances in technology like MRI scans, we now know that nothing could be further from the truth. The exciting reality is that every single time you learn a new fact or a new skill, you actually physically change your brain. This is neuroplasticity. Moving on to part 2, how neuroplasticity actually works. Let's zoom way into the cellular level to see the mechanics of how your behavior physically rebuilds your brain. So the crucial point here is that neuroplasticity isn't just one single mechanism. Your brain actually changes in 3 very distinct ways. First up, chemical changes. Your brain transfers chemical signals between neurons, and by increasing the concentration of these chemicals, it can change rapidly. This supports short-term memory or quick motor improvements. Second, structural changes. This is where the brain literally alters the physical connections between neurons. Because it's a physical change, it takes more time, but it is the absolute foundation of long-term memory. And third, functional changes. As you use a specific brain region, it becomes more excitable and easier to use again, causing entire networks of brain activity to shift and reorganize. Think about trying to learn a new motor skill, say playing the piano or maybe juggling. You practice, you get better within that single session, and you think, awesome, I've totally got it. But then you come back the next day and all those improvements are gone. What gives? Well, in the short term, your brain effectively increased its chemical signaling, but those rapid chemical changes didn't trigger the physical structural changes needed for long-term memory. Short-term performance just does not equal lasting learning. You really have to put in the time to physically lay the bricks and build that structural wall in your mind. And the evidence for this is absolutely incredible. The physical structure of your brain actually enlarges in response to specialized, repeated behaviors. People who read Braille literally have larger hand sensory areas in their brains. If you are right-handed, the motor region on the left side of your brain is physically bigger. And amazingly, London taxi drivers who have to memorize massive, wildly complex city maps just to get a license have physically larger brain regions devoted entirely to spatial and mapping memories. It's just wild. All right, part 3, the stroke recovery puzzle. We've seen how beautifully plastic the brain is, so let's zoom back out and look at the real-world obstacles we face when trying to actually harness this science. So, if our brains are so wonderfully plastic, why on earth don't people fully recover from brain damage? It's a tough question, but it bridges the gap between the optimism of neuroplasticity and the stark medical reality of neurological damage. Why do kids struggle in school? And specifically, what limits neuroplasticity when the brain is actually injured? To put the scale of this into perspective, stroke has recently dropped to the 4th leading cause of death in the United States, which, hey, sounds like great news, right? But the reality is that the actual number of people having strokes hasn't gone down at all. We are simply better at keeping people alive after a severe stroke. As a result, stroke remains the absolute leading cause of long-term adult disability in the world. It's an enormous societal problem. And the really frustrating truth we have to face is that helping a brain recover is like climbing an incredibly steep mountain. We know that massive doses of practice are required to relearn skills. But the major roadblock to delivering therapies is extreme person-to-person variability. Every single individual's pattern of neuroplasticity is different. Because everyone's brain changes differently, the medical field has historically failed to develop universally effective rehabilitation interventions. What works for one person simply might not work for another. Which leads us perfectly into part 4, the personalization paradigm. Let's see how this medical puzzle actually builds an entirely new framework for how all of us learn. First off, we have to remember that neuroplasticity isn't just some magical tool for self-improvement. It is highly reactive. Our brains are constantly being shaped by what we do, but also by what we don't do. Positive neuroplasticity is learning a new language or refining a motor skill, pushing our capabilities up. But negative neuroplasticity? That's forgetting something you once knew, developing a drug addiction, or suffering from chronic pain. It can easily drag us down. You are actively shaping your brain in whichever direction you push it. And because each of our plastic brains is entirely unique, we have to abandon generalized rules. You know that popular idea that it takes exactly 10,000 hours of practice to master a skill? Yeah, that's a vast oversimplification. For some people, mastering a skill will take way more than 10,000 hours. For others, it'll take far less. There is absolutely no single recipe or one-size-fits-all approach to learning.
This brings us to a revolutionary concept borrowed directly from cancer treatments: personalized medicine. In cancer, genetics match a patient to a specific chemotherapy. In brain recovery and learning, researchers are looking at biomarkers. These are specific characteristics of your unique brain structure and function. By identifying your unique biomarkers, we can match specific therapies or teaching methods to you individually. Personalized medicine is basically paving the way for personalized learning.
Finally, part 5, build the brain you want. Let's make this super personal and look at how you can apply these discoveries to your daily habits right now. Here are your key takeaways. Number 1, your behavior is the absolute best driver of neuroplastic change. There's no magic neuroplasticity pill you can swallow. You just have to do the work. But here is perhaps the most empowering takeaway from this entire explainer. Research shows that feeling struggle when learning isn't a sign of failure. It actually leads to more learning and greater structural change in the brain. That feeling of frustration, that is the literal physical feeling of your brain building long-term structural connections. Embrace it. And lastly, because your brain is shaped by everything you do, you must actively break habits that are unhealthy for it.
Also, give yourself some grace. Your optimal learning strategies are going to vary not just compared to the person sitting next to you, but even within yourself depending on the task. For you, learning to read sheet music might come incredibly easily, while learning the physical balance required to snowboard might be an immense struggle. And you know what? That is perfectly normal.
Your brain is absolutely magnificent. And right now, you and your plastic brain are constantly being shaped by the world around you. Everything you encounter, everything you experience, and every single behavior you choose is fundamentally altering your mind's physical structure, for better or for worse. So armed with this knowledge, my final question to you is this: what specific daily behaviors will you change today so that you can build the exact brain you want tomorrow? Think about it. Keep learning, embrace the struggle, and we'll see you in the next explainer.